Imagine walking into a car dealership, excited to see the place you secretly own, only to be insulted, judged, and thrown out by the very manager who works for you. That's exactly what happened to Marcus, a man whose patience turned into the ultimate lesson in respect. What happened next left the entire staff speechless and changed the dealership forever. Ho's sharp words cut through the air like a blade, echoing inside the wide, brightly lit showroom. Heads turned. A hush fell over the customers who were browsing the latest luxury vehicles lined up under the glittering spotlights. Those were the very first words Marcus heard when he walked into the shiny glass doors of the largest car dealership in the city. He had barely stepped onto the pristine marble floor before a tall man in a pressed navy suit stormed across the room. The man's polished shoes clicked angrily as he approached. His face was tight with disdain, his jaw clenched, and his voice carried the kind of arrogance only someone in power thought they could afford. This was Richard, the dealership's manager. He positioned himself directly in Marcus's path, arms spread slightly, as if blocking a threat. His tone was sharp, dismissive, and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Out. Now. I don't need troublemakers hanging around here." Marcus blinked, stunned at the hostility. He was dressed casually in dark jeans, a clean polo shirt, and sneakers. Nothing extravagant, but neat and respectable. He looked around, noticing the stares from curious customers and employees who paused in their tracks to watch the confrontation. "Excuse me?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but puzzled. Richard scoffed. He folded his arms, tilting his head as if Marcus's very presence was an insult. "You heard me. This is not a public hangout. This dealership sells premium cars. Vehicles here cost more than your house. And judging by the way you're dressed, you can't afford to even breathe near them. So, do yourself a favor and leave before I call security." The words hung heavy in the air. A few customers shifted uncomfortably, exchanging whispers. One woman quietly ushered her child closer to her, as though Marcus were somehow dangerous just for being there. An older gentleman frowned disapprovingly at Richard, but stayed silent, not wanting to cause trouble. Marcus took in the scene quietly. He wasn't quick to anger. He had learned long ago that patience often spoke louder than shouting. Still, inside, he couldn't ignore the sting of humiliation. Not because of Richard's insult. Marcus had endured far worse in his life, but because of the assumption behind it. The manager had sized him up in less than 3 seconds and decided he wasn't worthy of respect. Marcus's eyes flicked to the cars on display. Sleek black sedans, shiny red sports cars, and a white SUV that gleamed under the lights. Each one was positioned like a trophy, surrounded by velvet ropes and glossy posters. He knew exactly what they were worth. He also knew something nobody else in the room knew. Because Marcus hadn't come here to buy a car. He hadn't come here to browse or loiter, as Richard called it. He had come for something far bigger. The irony made him want to laugh, but he stayed silent, his expression unreadable. He let Richard's words hang in the air, unchallenged for the moment. His calmness seemed to unnerve the manager, who shifted uncomfortably but doubled down with more arrogance. "Didn't you hear me the first time?" Richard snapped. "Out. I don't repeat myself." Marcus finally let out a small smile, though not the kind Richard expected. It was the quiet, knowing smile of a man who held a secret. "Don't worry," Marcus said evenly, his voice controlled, his posture relaxed. "I'll leave soon enough." Richard smirked, convinced he'd won the standoff. He adjusted his tie, puffed out his chest, and gestured toward the door. "Good. Make it quick." But Marcus wasn't finished. He locked eyes with the manager and added calmly, almost like a warning, "But you'll regret the way you just spoke to me." The words sent a ripple through the crowd. Customers raised their eyebrows. Employees exchanged nervous glances. Richard, however, let out a derisive laugh. "Oh, really?" he sneered, his tone dripping with mockery. "And why's that? What are you going to do? Write a bad review online? Please. I've been running this place for years. One complaint won't change a thing." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in just a few short hours, Richard and everyone else would discover the truth. And when they did, it wouldn't just change the dealership. It would change the entire direction of their lives. For now, though, Marcus simply turned his gaze back to the cars, his calm demeanor hiding the storm that was about to come. What Richard didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just an ordinary visitor. Far from it. Marcus was a self-made entrepreneur, a man who had built his fortune brick by brick, starting from almost nothing. He had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunities were rare and expectations were low. But through grit, relentless discipline, and an eye for smart investments, Marcus had carved out a different future for himself. First came real estate. While others spent money on flashy things, Marcus saved every dollar he could, buying small rental properties, fixing them up, and turning them into steady sources of income. Later, he saw the rise of tech startups and invested wisely, partnering with innovators who shared his vision. Over the years, those choices multiplied his wealth. By now, he wasn't just comfortable, he was wealthy enough to pick and choose his ventures. And for years, Marcus had been quietly searching for the right kind of business to expand into. Something stable, something with potential, something he could not only grow but also reshape. That's when this dealership came across his desk. It was one of the largest in the city, well-established and profitable, but it had a reputation problem. High turnover, unhappy staff, and whispers of poor management. Exactly the kind of challenge Marcus was known for transforming. Just last week, after months of negotiations, Marcus had finalized the purchase. The deal had been kept quiet, the transition handled discreetly. The employees didn't know yet. Even the manager hadn't been informed, though he was about to find out in a very personal way. Today, Marcus had walked through those glass doors not as a customer, but as the official new owner. He wanted to introduce himself, get a feel for the atmosphere, and start building relationships with the people who would now work under his leadership. But instead of a warm welcome, he was met with hostility the moment he stepped inside. Richard, the manager, narrowed his eyes and sneered at him again, doubling down. "Didn't you hear me?" he said louder this time, as though Marcus were hard of hearing. "I said leave. I don't know what game you're playing, but this isn't a free showroom for window shoppers. Out. Now." The arrogance was thick in his voice. Richard wasn't just asking Marcus to leave. He was trying to humiliate him in front of everyone. Yet Marcus didn't flinch. He simply smiled, and that smile, calm, patient, and steady, was more unnerving than anger ever could be. His calmness unsettled the arrogant manager, who shifted slightly. "Don't worry," Marcus replied softly, his tone so steady it made the room fall even quieter. "I'll leave soon enough." But he paused just long enough for the tension to grow. "You'll regret the way you spoke to me." The words were measured, deliberate, and confident. Not shouted, not emotional, just a calm statement of fact. Richard rolled his eyes dramatically and shook his head. He let out a short, mocking laugh, convinced he was dealing with just another man he could belittle. "Regret," Richard repeated, raising his voice so the nearby customers could hear. "The only thing I regret is wasting my time arguing with someone who clearly doesn't belong here. You think your little warning scares me? Please. I've dealt with people like you my whole career. You'll be gone in 5 minutes, and I'll never think about you again." Marcus said nothing more. He didn't need to, because in just a short time, Richard would discover exactly who he had been talking to. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't be Marcus walking away in shame. It would be Richard. Later that afternoon, the dealership employees gathered in the main showroom for a mandatory meeting. The rows of sleek cars had been pushed aside to make space, and folding chairs were lined up in neat rows. Salespeople, mechanics, receptionists, and office staff all filled the room, buzzing with speculation. The rumor was out. A new owner had taken over. Excitement and nervous energy rippled through the crowd. Some hoped the new leadership would mean raises, better hours, or maybe even a fresh start. Others worried about layoffs or stricter rules. But everyone agreed it was going to be a big change. Richard, the dealership's manager, stood confidently near the front, straightening his tie for the 5th time. He wore a smug smile, feeling important. In his mind, this was his chance. If he impressed the new owner, maybe he could climb even higher. Regional manager, perhaps, or a cushy corporate role. He imagined shaking hands, cracking a charming joke, maybe even giving a speech about his dedication to the dealership. Little did he know, his proud daydreams were about to collapse. The chatter in the room hushed as the glass doors at the far end opened. Everyone turned, and in walked Marcus, the same man Richard had thrown out just hours before. The same man Richard had mocked in front of customers. The reaction was instant. Gasps spread through the crowd. Employees whispered to each other, eyes wide in disbelief. A few even smiled knowingly, as though karma itself had walked into the room. Richard's confident expression shattered. His jaw dropped, his face drained of color. He stood frozen, blinking rapidly, as if trying to convince himself he wasn't seeing correctly. Marcus didn't rush. He walked with a calm, steady stride, his presence commanding attention without a single word. He wasn't dressed in a flashy suit or dripping in jewelry, just a neat, sharp outfit that radiated quiet authority. At the front of the room, the regional representative from the parent company stepped forward with a bright smile. He held out a hand toward Marcus and announced clearly, "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce your new owner, Mr. Marcus Johnson." The room erupted in applause. Some employees clapped eagerly, others cautiously, but all of them knew this was history in the making. All except Richard, who felt like the floor had been pulled out from under him. This can't be happening, he thought, his chest tightening. That man? The one I threw out? The one I insulted? But there was no mistake. It was real. Marcus stepped forward, his expression composed but warm. He raised a hand slightly, and the applause faded. "Thank you all for the warm welcome," Marcus began, his voice smooth, confident, and steady. "I'm excited to work with each of you. Together, we're going to grow this dealership into something even greater, something we can all be proud of." The employees nodded, some smiling with relief. His words were genuine, and they could feel it. This wasn't just a businessman talking numbers. This was a leader who saw them as people. Then Marcus paused. His eyes slowly swept the room, finally locking on Richard, who stood stiff and pale near the front. The silence was heavy. Everyone could sense something was about to happen. Marcus tilted his head slightly, his calm smile never wavering. "But before we continue," he said deliberately, his voice dropping into a firmer tone, "there's something we need to address." Dozens of eyes shifted from Marcus to Richard. The employees already guessed where this was going. Richard swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. His earlier arrogance was gone. His palms began to sweat, and his legs felt weak. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his words alone filled the room. And for the first time all day, Richard understood exactly who he was dealing with. The entire room went silent. It was the kind of silence that weighed heavy, where even the sound of breathing seemed loud. Every employee, every customer still lingering nearby, sensed what was about to unfold. Marcus turned, his expression calm but firm, and extended his hand, not in greeting, but to point directly at Richard. The gesture was sharp, deliberate, and final. Earlier today, Marcus began, his voice steady and commanding. "This man insulted me. He judged me the moment I walked through those doors. He tried to throw me out of my own business." Gasps rippled through the room. All eyes darted to Richard, who stood frozen, his once proud stance crumbling under the weight of the accusation. Marcus didn't stop. His words were like steady strikes of a hammer. He looked at me and decided I wasn't good enough to step inside this building. He made assumptions about my worth, my place, my right to be here. And I want to make one thing absolutely clear. That kind of attitude has no place in my company. Whispers filled the room instantly, like a wave crashing against the walls. Employees exchanged knowing glances, some even nodding subtly. It wasn't news to them. Richard's arrogance was something they had all experienced in one form or another. He talked down to junior staff, dismissed mechanics as if they were beneath him, and belittled customers who didn't look wealthy enough. For years, they had put up with it, powerless to do anything. But now someone with real authority was saying it out loud. Richard's face burned red. He tried to force a smile, but it came out twisted and weak. His voice cracked as he stammered, "Yes, sir, it was a misunderstanding. I didn't know who you were. If I had known, I would have." Marcus raised a hand, cutting him off like a blade slicing through the air. "That's exactly the problem, Richard." His tone sharpened, each word deliberate. "Respect should never depend on who someone is or how much money they have. True respect is treating every person with dignity, whether they're a billionaire, a janitor, or a walk-in customer who just came to look. If you can't understand that, you don't belong here." The words sank into the room like a stone dropping into water. Employees sat straighter. For a moment, there was silence again, just the echo of those words bouncing around the showroom. Then, like a dam breaking, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't forced, it wasn't polite, it was genuine. Salespeople clapped with relief. Mechanics in the back whistled and cheered. Even customers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation joined in, smiling as if they too had been vindicated. For the first time in a long while, the staff felt like they had a leader who valued fairness over favoritism, respect over arrogance. Richard, meanwhile, stood frozen, his pride shattered. His carefully constructed authority had been stripped away in seconds, undone by his own arrogance. As the applause thundered around him, Richard realized the bitter truth. He hadn't just lost his job. He had lost the respect of every single person in that room. And Marcus? He stood tall, his expression calm but resolute. He hadn't just fired a manager. He had set the tone for his leadership. A new chapter had begun. After the meeting ended, the employees began filing out. But Marcus didn't rush to leave. Instead, he stayed behind, inviting anyone who wanted to speak with him to gather around. Slowly, the workers, salespeople, mechanics, receptionists, and even the janitorial staff approached, unsure at first. But Marcus's demeanor put them at ease. He wasn't standing above them like a boss barking orders. He sat casually on the edge of a desk, leaning forward, listening intently. He asked questions about their day-to-day experiences. "What challenges do you face here? What do you think could make this dealership better for both employees and customers? What ideas do you have that were never taken seriously before?" The staff were hesitant at first, but soon their words poured out. One mechanic admitted he felt overlooked despite working long hours. A receptionist spoke about how Richard had constantly criticized her in front of others, lowering her confidence. A senior salesperson explained that many good employees had left simply because the atmosphere had become unbearable. Marcus nodded thoughtfully at every comment. He didn't dismiss a single idea, no matter how small. And when he finally spoke, his words carried warmth and conviction. "I want you all to know this. From today onward, this dealership will not just be about selling cars. It will be about building a culture where respect comes first, where every employee feels valued, where customers feel welcomed the moment they step through those doors." The employees exchanged hopeful glances. Many of them had never heard words like that from someone in charge before. Marcus continued, "I promise better working conditions, opportunities for growth, a workplace where hard work is rewarded and arrogance has no room to breathe. Together, we're going to make this dealership not just successful, but a place people are proud to be part of." It wasn't just talk. Within weeks, changes became visible. Marcus introduced training programs to help employees improve their skills. He created incentive systems that rewarded teamwork, not just individual sales. Break areas were upgraded, schedules made fairer, and voices once ignored were now heard. The difference was night and day. Employees came to work with energy instead of dread. Customers noticed the shift immediately. Word of mouth spread quickly. People who had once avoided the dealership because of its reputation were now recommending it. Families came in not just to buy cars, but because they felt respected, treated with dignity, and welcomed. Within months, sales soared. The dealership's reputation skyrocketed. What had once been a toxic environment was now a thriving community. And all of it had started with a single decision: Marcus refusing to tolerate arrogance and disrespect. As for Richard, he left the building that day with his head down, a box of belongings in his arms, and no applause to follow him. His arrogance, his habit of judging others, had finally cost him everything. Marcus, on the other hand, walked out of that same building with his head held high. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was a leader who had shown that success isn't measured only by money or status, but by character. And that simple truth echoed long after. Treat people with dignity, and you'll always walk taller than those who don't. And that's the story of how arrogance met its downfall, and respect won the day. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful tales like this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching.